Hey, it's Anna. Welcome back to my channel. And earlier this month, Rolling Stones put out an article talking about the most talked books about on Book Talk for this year so far. And I've not read the article, so I thought it would be fun to blind react to it, see how many I've read, give you some reactions, maybe actually read some reviews if I've written reviews about these books, and just see if that matches up with my personal For You page and seeing what books I've been seeing talked about a lot on book social media. Again, this is a Rolling Stones article. It's the 11 most talked about books so far. I have my handy dandy laptop here, so I will be looking at that live, seeing what there is to say. So we are starting at number 11 with Housemates by Emma Copley Eisenberg. I've never heard of this book. I have never seen it on my For You page. No idea. Zero clue. I've seen nothing about this. Is this really one of the... Now listen, I was expecting to not necessarily have read some of the books on this list just because I am pretty methodical with how I pick out my TBR right now. But the fact that the first one, I have absolutely no clue, I look like such a fraud. Okay, so let's read what the article says. So it says, what if Jack Kerouac's On the Road was about two lesbians from Philadelphia? After graduating college, Bernie moves into a large shared home in Philly where she tries and fails to fully join her housemate's world. But when her former mentor and photographer Daniel Dunn, who had his career ruined by sexual harassment scandal, dies and bequeaths Bernie his rundown home, she and her roommate Leah decide to turn it into their road trip to her inheritance into an exploration of Midwest. While Emma Copley Eisenberg's Housemates has the quintessential meandering necessary for a road trip novel, it takes a major turn by allowing its queer liberal main characters to address their own complicated feelings about art, love, and wealth in the middle age of a giant statewide art project. Housemates has been a staple on the app since its May 2024 release and has been dubbed by dozens of creators as the queer book of the summer. I had no idea about this book. Looking at the cover too, I can honestly see why this hasn't been on my For You page, because I just don't covers like that just don't really appeal to me. They still feel too adult for me. I'm not fully in my adult era yet of dealing with the books. Also very happy to see that there is queer literature on this list that's most talked about. I definitely think that's a reflection on what I've been looking for on my For You page. Now, some queer books that I've read this year have been by Aiden Thomas in the YA sphere. This feels a little more adult than the Aiden Thomas books. So maybe I'm just not on adult queer side of the For You page. Number 10 is The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. I have also not read this. I've at least heard of this and I want to read this. This seems a little bit more we're still in the YA sphere. I'm pretty sure Poppy Wars is YA. It might not be. I always think of it as young adult, but people have said it's actually pretty, I don't know, war themed. Maybe it's not young adult. This just seems more like an overarching fantasy trilogy. That's something I feel like I can dig personally my teeth into a bit more. I'm not surprised this is on the list. I feel like if this was number 11, I would have been like, oh, okay, yeah, Poppy War's number 11. I'm still really thrown off by the Housemates. So let's read what the article has to say about the Poppy War. This debut fantasy novel by author R.F. Kuang isn't just another example of a strong female protagonist. The Poppy War is a military epic that charts orphan Rin's journey from poor waif to student at the highly prestigious military academy, Singard. There she trains her body and her mind, eventually becoming a student of shamanism and learning how to speak to the gods. But when war breaks out, Rin finds herself not in tight ranks on the front line, but part of an assassin-heavy special forces group, one where all of her fellow soldiers are also shamans. It is a coming-of-age story set in the midst of bloodshed, trauma, and addiction, but the world building makes it one of the go-to entry points for readers trying to dive into the fantasy space headfirst. I gotta look up if the Poppy War is YA. Alright, it is not YA. Okay, just checking. But we have an overarching fantasy trilogy. I feel like I've seen a lot of folks talk about this on my personal For You page. I've definitely seen the Poppy Wars all over. I know that if I'm going to start it, I would want to read all three pretty much in quick succession. So that's on me. I definitely want to read them. So far we're not doing too hot on this list. We're 0 out of 2 for ones that I've read, and we're 1 out of 2 for ones that I know. This is not the way I thought this video would be going. All right, number 9 is The Atlas 6 by Olivia Blake. I've heard of this one, so we're 2 for 3 for books that I've heard of. I'm also not surprised this is on the list. Well, to a point. point. I think the fourth book came out in 2024 or at the end of 2023. So it looks like the Atlas Complex, which is the third book in the series, came out in 2024 this year. So I guess I'm a little surprised to see the first book. But again, if you're talking about books that are just talked about in the book space, I feel like more people talk about the first book in a series, whether they like it or dislike it. The Atlas 6 is not a book that I'm personally going to be picking up. I've read Olive E. Blake's book. I love her YA, but I've been told that her adult is quite different and that I am probably not going to like it. So I have not picked up the Atlas 6. I don't necessarily plan to either. Let's see what Rolling Stones has to say about it. The secret history walked so this dark, magical murder grad school novel could run. Previously known for her steadfast work in the Harry Potter fan fiction community, Olive E. Blake's Atlas 6 series went from a self-published novel to a New York Times bestseller because of Book Talk. The series takes place at the Alexandrian Society, a secret group that admits an annual class of magicians and gives them access to some of the biggest secrets in the known and unknown universe. The catch? They only have a year before their mysterious initiation ritual. No one knows what it is, but someone has to die for the rest of the group to pass. This book leans heavily on the prose and world building, but its rag to riches story has continued to make it a Book Talk favorite. See, and that description doesn't sound bad. The reason that I know folks have told me that it's not my style is because I've already read an Olive E. Blake book and didn't like her writing style, for me personally, and I've wondered about listening to it on audiobook, but I think people said that they don't like the audiobook of this book just because there's so many perspectives. So that's what I've heard and seen about this, so that's why I won't necessarily be picking this one up, but at least I've seen this one, so we're maybe on an upward trend here. Number 8 is My Year of Rest and Relaxation. I've maybe seen one video about this. I'm not even gonna lie to you, so I can't even count it. So we are 1 for 4 on books that I've read and 2 for 4 on books that I've heard of. This list is going absolutely fantastic. This cover reminds me of something that you might read in like an art history class, so to speak. It's not a bad cover. It's just when I think of like the book covers I own, even the spines that you see behind me, it just doesn't necessarily fit what I'm reading right now. Now, would I ever read it? I don't know. We're gonna have to see what Rolling Stone says first to see if I can even develop an opinion on it, because like I said, I feel like I've seen one video about this book. The best way to describe this Book Talk darling is a drug-fused sleep haze. Okay, that was an interesting first sentence. The main character doesn't even have a name, but readers get an immediate view that she's rich, bored, and extremely tired. Rather than address any of her problems, the narrator convinces a sketchy psychiatrist to prescribe her a cocktail of pills that renders her increasingly comatose. She begins taking harder pills at an access, leaving waking hours for walks and adventures that she can't remember. At the heart of the story is a woman convinced she could be better if only she could sleep through an entire year. Like most of Otessa's Moshfegh's books, My Year of Rest and Relaxation has little actual plot. Alright, that's all I need to know. But the book has become a go-to pick for Book Talk creators who want to distinguish themselves from the romance crowd. That's so funny. I need books with some types of plot. I can do character-driven stories if they remind me of like some type of reality TV type of show. That's pretty much how I can read most character-driven books. But if you have any character-driven books that are anywhere type of serious or anything, I can't do it. I just can't do it. I need something to sink my teeth into plot-wise, which now makes sense because I feel like I lean more towards plot-driven books on my social media pages, and so it makes sense why I haven't really seen this one around a lot. That was a very interesting description of that book, though. I'm still thinking about that first sentence of the drug haze. That was wild. Put in an article. All right, number 7 is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I've seen this one like all over. This is one where I am not surprised necessarily that it's on the list because I feel like I still see this one all over the place. I have not ever read it. I have personally no interest in reading it. I'm somebody, again, that like judges books by their covers and vibes. This isn't really something that I necessarily look for, so I haven't really given it a ton of thought. But since we're reading these little paragraphs from Rolling Stones telling us what the books are about, maybe I'll change my mind. So the Rolling Stone says, while Book Talk has a habit of allowing the most general crowd-pleasing options to rise to the top, sometimes the community's popularity lands firmly on a deserving book. Such is the case with The Secret History, the famed 1992 novel from Donna Tartt. A secretive group of New England liberal arts students accepts a newcomer into their rank, transfer student Richard Papin. But as the group dives further into their studies, Richard reveals a terrible secret holding his friends hostage. By coming up with an even darker solution, the group is thrust into dark schemes of chaos and murder, ruining themselves and their lives in the process. Since The Secret History, a bestseller since its publication, rose to popularity once again in 2020, it directly inspired a resurgence of the internet aesthetic dark academia. Okay, that description actually sounds really good. This is one where I'm glad I do videos like this where I look at different books, because then I can because I don't usually read descriptions before I pick up books. I go based off recommendations, talking to friends, book covers, things like that. So this sounds more interesting than I was giving the cover credit for, because I once again thought this was like an art history book. So I don't know if I would buy the book outright, but this is something where I kind of want to look at Libby, which is a library app where you can rent books. I might look on Libby for the audiobook and just see kind of what it looks like and see if it has decent availability or if I want to put it on hold. But this is one where, again, at least I've heard of it, but I definitely judged it beforehand. So I'm glad I have this article to kind of like pique my interest. So we've officially heard of 3 out of 5 books. I've read 1 out of 5. Fantastic. I don't know. I don't even know how it's going to get, how it's going to go from here. So let's see what number 6 is. We have Funny Story by Emily Henry. It's on my shelf. I've read it. This is the red side of my shelf. So that's good. We are 2 for 6. Am I counting right? We're 2 for 6 in books that I've read. And I loved Emily Henry's Funny Story. I mean, the main character reminded me of myself. I don't know what that says about me, but she did remind me of myself, and Milo reminded me of my husband. So I just had like a special little personal place for this book in my heart. Let's see what Rolling Stones has to say about it, because I'm sure it's gonna be, I don't know. I feel like I've seen a lot of folks say they love this book or they don't like this book. This is one I've seen all over my For You page. So we're 4 for 6 for books that I've seen on my For You page, which is, you know, upward momentum, right? And I don't know, it'll be interesting to see what Rolling Stones has to say about it. And they were roommates. Someone my age had to have written this article. There's absolutely no way around it. Somebody my age or older had to have written this article. And they were roommates doesn't begin to describe the wacky housing circumstances that Emily Henry's Funny Story throws readers into head first. Daphne loves her relationship with her fiance Peter so much so that after accepting his proposal, there's typos in this, I'm sorry. That says he's proposal. I gotta look at the author. I'm so sorry. C.T. Jones. C.T. Jones, someone needs to be checking you. That's like the 3rd typo I've seen in this article. And listen, I'm not the best speller. Accepting his proposal, sorry. Accepting his proposal, she agrees to move to his hometown. Sure, they're in a partnership, but she lives in his house. She hangs out with his friends, and she's basically taken on his life. So when Peter realizes that he's actually in love with his best friend, Petra, Daphne is shocked to find herself stuck in a town she never wanted to be in the first place. She needs a place to live, but it just so happens that the only available room in Waning Bay, Michigan, happens to belong to Petra's ex, Miles. Trying to get back at their exes, the two end up fake dating, but in the process, they learn about what they really want out of life and what it means to choose yourself and still find love in the process. I realized my countings were incorrect. I've only read 1 out of the 6 books, not 2. I, for some reason, convinced myself I read Poppy Wars. So this is the only book I've read. I rated it a 5 out of 5 stars. I can't really get the opinion of this author, how they feel about this book, but based off the earlier comment in My Year of Rest and Relaxation, where the author says, you know, that they wanted this book for people who want to distinguish themselves from the romance crowd, and Emily Henry's a big part of the romance crowd. I don't really know if the author likes this book or not, but I did. I personally did. I love fake dating. I love stories about women self-discovering things, even if they should have discovered it from the beginning. The journey is so nice. So 5 out of 5 stars. So I've heard about 4 out of 6 books. I've read 1 out of 6. Let's see if that gets any better. It's not getting any better. It's not getting any better. A Little Life by Hania Yahaganara. I did have to look up the pronunciation of the author's last name, so I'm sorry if I butchered it. I've seen this book though. I've seen this. We're 5 for 7 on Seeing Books. Have not read it. 1 for 7. Am I gonna pick? I don't know. I feel like because I've seen this so much and people are always crying at the end of it, and I'm not a big crier. I just don't like to put myself through that necessarily in books. If a book does make me cry, I'm usually not like expecting it. I don't know what to think about this one. And it's not people crying like a little bit. It's like sobs. And I just don't know. I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if I'm in a place mentally where I like want to put myself through that when there are other books I want to read. So let's see what Rolling Stones has to say about it. Book talk isn't all romance and intrigue. Sometimes the community's favorite thing is a good old-fashioned cry. See what I mean? And Hania Yahaganara's most famous work has remained a staple on the app for its sheer consistency in leaving readers physically and emotionally devastated. The The book introduces readers to 4 friends with aspiring careers: Jude St. Francis, Willem Ragnarsson, Malcolm Irvine, and John Baptiste J.B. Marion. But through flashbacks and shifting perspectives, the 700-page tome reveals an agonizing pattern of trauma, abuse, addiction, sexual violence, and suicide for its main characters. Happy endings do not exist in this book, but they're teased just enough to leave even the toughest reader wrung dry. I don't know if I have the mental capacity to read this book. I know quite a few of my friends have read it. Nobody has outright recommended it to me. I must say that. No one's been like, Anna, you should really read A Little Life. No one has said that. So I'm taking that as a sign that, not now. One day? Maybe. I didn't realize it was 4 perspectives either with the multiple POVs. That's kind of interesting. And already knowing that there's no happy endings, I don't know. It kind of reminds me of They Both Die at the End, where you know the ending from the beginning, and yes, it's YA, but it tricks you right into hoping that that's not going to happen. So like, I didn't cry to They Both Die at the end because I was like, the author told us they both die at the end. So this is already telling me that, like, I don't know, I would be surprised if anybody in this book lived, I guess. Sounds like all of them aren't going to live. So I don't know if I'm just too like skeptical to read it. I don't know. Might be interesting to see my own reaction as someone who's a very, I guess, like non-emotional reader. I don't know. Now I'm thinking about it more. I don't know what I would do. I gotta like toss that idea around in my head a bit and see. All right, we're on to number 4, which is Icebreaker by Hannah Grace. I have read this. I gave this like a 3.5 on Goodreads. Not my favorite. Now, I am not a big like spicy book talk reader. I still need a plot. If you're gonna do something with your characters, still give them a plot. It can't all be around their like sexual experiences for me personally. And this book, I feel like had a lot of that to where I was just like, it's too much. I was like, give me back to the plot. I don't care that they're hooking up right now. There are so many unresolved questions. I need to get back there. So that's how I felt about it. Obviously, do I think it's the spiciest book I've ever read? No. Do I think that some people feel like it is? Absolutely. And that's where I've seen all over my For You page of like, I can't believe I saw this kid with this book, the cartoon cover discussions, all of that. We've seen 6 out of 8 on my For You page, which is great. And I've read 2 out of 8. Which is great. So let's see what the Rolling Stones author has to say about Icebreaker. Before there was a Seattle hockey team asking people to please stop sexualizing their players during games. Oh my gosh. This author's a little messy. I'm not gonna lie. Wow. I definitely remember that. Like, I remember seeing that book talk drama with the whole Seattle hockey team. And I was just like, this is great. This itself could be a book. Anyway, there was a hockey themed wave on Book Talk. I don't think that wave has gone away. There was? I still fully believe that hockey romance books are well and alive, but folks just don't associate it with real folks anymore. It's still alive and well. It combined tropes and the romance genre all in one place and made every book that even featured hockey players popular. But at the heart of the trend was this fan favorite and aggressively sexy college novel by Hannah Grace. Icebreaker tracks aspiring Team USA figure skater Anastasia Allen as she tries to train for an upcoming championship. But after a snafu on the ice threatens to derail her career, hockey team captain Nate Hawkins steps in, and the two realize that there might be some steamier desires beyond their constant bickering. Don't let the cartoon cover fool you. This book is full of sex. I don't think it's full of. There are definitely spicier hockey romance books out there. But Grace hasn't shied away from the fact that the juxtaposing cover and content might mean younger people are reading. Quote, I know people who are under 18 are reading my books and I can't do anything about it, Grace told the New York Times. They're going to consume content that is explicit, but I think there's a better way to write it and portray it than has been given to other generations. Yeah, I mean, like, she can't control necessarily who buys her books, and as long as it's shelved in the adults section, like, what are you truly supposed to do, right? You can't control where people walk in a bookstore. As long as I think it's classified appropriately, like, there's no issue. If Icebreaker was in a YA section, like, that's not gonna help, right? Because the main characters aren't necessarily YA. They're both in their 20s, if I'm correct with that. So I'm just saying, there's really nothing folks can do about consuming content. I definitely think it's on you as somebody who can consume content, what to read, and if you are a parent of a child, to a point, right? There's so much to be controlled, but it's not on the author. That's silly. Number 3, we have Butcher and Blackbird by Brynne Weaver. This I have seen. Yep. So I don't physically own Butcher and Blackbird. I listened to the audiobook of it. it, and the audiobook I thought was very well done. This I would even consider potentially having more sex scenes or a similar number of sex scenes to Icebreaker, personally. And it definitely plays on that like dark humor, definitely more gory. If you can't handle anything that has to do with eyeballs, like I would not recommend picking this one up. I think I rated this like a 4 or a 4.5 out of 5 stars. So we've officially read 3 of the 9 books. We're doing great. And I'm definitely interested to see where the Butcher and Blackbird series goes. I will say, I don't know how much money they paid for advertising this book, but I also think that's part of the reason it was everywhere. I feel like every Book of the Month advertisement had Butcher and Blackbird, and I feel like those were everywhere for a while. And then obviously folks reviewing it, folks saying they love it. So definitely have seen all over my For You page. So we're 7 out of 9 for books that I've seen. Let's see what this author has to say about Butcher and Blackbird. Some people just need an author to match their freak. And in Bryn Weaver's case, whatever Book Talk asks for, she delivers. The author's most internet famous work, Butcher and Blackbird, gives readers an up-close and personal look at Sloane and Rowan's love story. After meeting at work, oh, that's so interesting to introduce it as work before explaining what they do. After meeting at work, the two plan an annual scavenger hunt competition that takes them across the country and eventually into each other's arms. Oh, and did I mention they're both notorious psychopathic serial killers? So that work isn't data entry. It's finding people to string up and murder in increasingly deranged ways. And then they kiss. That's a ridiculous description. It's not wrong. I think it's funny. The first entry in Weaver's Ruinous Love series. This book is so NSFW. I don't know what that acronym means. We need to look that up. NSFW acronym. Not safe for work. That some Book Talk creators market it by posting its trigger warnings. Yeah. I feel like if any book has trigger warnings, it's good to let folks know because like you never really know. It's a long list of trigger warnings in this book too. So I feel like it's important for folks to know. Like my one friend definitely does not like anything to do with eyeballs. I think she still listened to the book, but like was just like, ooh, eyeballs. I don't know if that fully makes sense. But don't yuck people's yums. That's fine. According to Deadline, Weaver has sold over 1 million copies of her books in over 18 countries, and the book is already being adapted into a feature film. That's really interesting. How are they going to do this film? Just having read the book, that's wild. How are they going to do a film for it? Oh my goodness. All right, we're on to the second most talked about book, which is Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. Yep. That's not a surprise. I remember some folks getting an advanced reader copy of this on NetGalley and absolutely raving about it, talking about how good it was. I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I gave Iron Flame, the second book, to this, which I'm surprised Iron Flame isn't on this list actually, because I feel like there is a major following for Fourth Wing in general. I do have my own copy of Fourth Wing physically. Of the 4 books that I've read, I only physically own 2 of them. This was a first edition print, as you can tell by the dragons. This is also signed by Rebecca Yarros, so I know I'm on some folks' Rob list for this, even though this wasn't my favorite book of all time. I think it's a great book for folks who've never read fantasy before, to get them into fantasy, but there is so much other complex fantasy out there that it just all depends. And I know the books get spicier over time between the main characters too, so it's going to be really interesting to see what this article author has to say. What if your school was built to kill you and your joints were already weak as it is? Rebecca Yarros' Fourth Wing takes a hard school year to the next level, throwing readers headfirst into the sweat-drenched life of Violet Sorrengail. After joining the nation's war college to become a legendary dragon rider, Violet must keep herself alive and keep away from Xaden Ryerson, the brutal wing leader. She has to remind herself that his parents were traitors, his friends are dangerous, and he'd kill her if he got the chance. It doesn't matter that his eyes are dreamy, or his abs are rock hard, or he keeps looking at her. This book has everything: danger, war, dragon bonding, and enough wild sex in castle walls to keep even the neediest Book Talk romantasy nerd fed for days, or however long it takes them to get through 500 pages. And I must say, when you're talking about like the 500 pages, I feel like the text is pretty small. So if this was printed in like a different format, I feel like it could be longer page-wise personally. There is like maybe one very spicier scene in this entire book. The second book definitely has more. So I feel like there's not that much wild sex, in my opinion, in this book. But I do think that does a good summary talking especially about romantasy and that genre of seeing where there is romance in fantasy where both are kind of these main plot points and one doesn't really overwhelm the other. And I think it's just a tough balance to do. So I'm not surprised this is on the list. So we're 4 for 10 on books read and 8 8 for 10 on books that have been on my For You page because, like, I have made videos about Fourth Wing, so it's been on my For You page. I've seen videos about Fourth Wing. So number 1, I'm gonna bet, taking a shot in the dark here, it's gonna be a Sarah J. Maas book. I would bet anything that that's what is going to be number 1. All right, number 1 is A Court of Mist and Fury. I have not read the ACOTAR series. I own it. That is something that is going to be like a longer term, read a book a month. I don't even know which one A Court of Mist and Fury is. Is that the long one or is that the short one? All right, it's 659 pages on a Google book preview and it's book 2 of the series. That's interesting. Why is book 1 not the most talked about one? I feel like I see book 1 all over my For You page. All over. I've seen this one. I'm gonna give myself that. So 9 out of 11, I've seen on my For You page. I haven't read this one yet. So that's really interesting. So let's see why this one is more popular than A Court of Thorns and Roses. Maybe the author will tell us. One of Book Talk's defining series is by author Sarah J. Maas, and it has spawned an entire genre push in the publishing industry called romantasy, clearly. While the hype started with A Court of Thorns and Roses, the first book in her series, the second book, A Court of Mist and Fury, has remained a fan favorite. Do people not like the first book? Is that why the second book's better? I gotta ask. I gotta ask somebody. Hopefully they'll respond to this video. Anyway, back to the description. We'll see if I get an answer. The series follows a young human girl named Feyre. I've seen enough where I think that's how her name is pronounced. Falling in love with an immortal Fey Lord. But while the first book leans into a dark retelling of the classic tale of Beauty and the Beast, really? I didn't know that. The sequel takes an abrupt twist, showing Feyre falling in love with an entirely different Fey Lord. It's darker, sexier, in the book you'll probably see people recommend the most on a random For You page. I disagree with that. I disagree. But it's not like my For You page is filled with a ton of ACOTAR content. So maybe if I leaned more into the ACOTAR content, I would see more of the second book. But I definitely see either the whole series talked about or the first book talked about. Yeah. Or you know what? Maybe I have inadvertently heard more about the second book because of like the twists and turns the series takes. But again, I haven't fully read it, so I don't actually know. I feel like ACOTAR is the most easily spoiled series on Book Talk by far. I've only seen one major spoiler for it, which I'm like kind of proud of. So we'll see how I feel about these books as I read them near the end of this year and into next year. So 9 out of 11 books that I have seen on my For You page, and I have read 4 out of 11 of them. Could be worse. I think I am definitely more on like the thriller and YA realm of Book Talk personally. All right, my friend just responded and she said that the second book is her favorite. Okay, so maybe I'm just not into that side yet. But I feel like if I was the one curating this list, I would probably leave the top 6 books on there and it would be the lower half that might get changed around to pull in some like Frida McFadden, pull in some Jennifer Lynn Barnes, some Holly Jackson. So I can see why. I'm curious what metric they use to create this list, but I'm curious, how many books have you seen on book social media? How many have you read? Is this person just like making this list out of nowhere? I'm kind of curious to see people's reaction to this. So this was fun. I feel like of all the books on that list, I'm most interested in trying to read The Secret History by Donna Tartt. Like that's what I seriously think as soon as I'm done recording on my phone, I'm going to look up on Libby. Next week, we have a readathon, and then in October, I'll post videos of meeting 2 authors and actually reading their books. I know I had talked about posting those earlier, but I actually wanted to read their books to talk about in the videos. So we're gonna leave it. So those are a little bit delayed, and then come on, I don't really know after that, but it's okay. I got a little bit of time for my brain to like seep, relax, think of some content. But as always, if there's anything that you want to see, definitely let me know in the comments, and definitely let me know if you've read any of the books on this list. And as always, keep on reading.